On October 18th of this year, a Suffolk County grand jury returned an indictment charging In-young Yu, 21 years old, of South Korea, with involuntary manslaughter in the suicide of her boyfriend, Alexander Urtula, 22 years old, who leapt to his death from the Renaissance parking garage in Roxbury at around 8:30 a.m. on May 20th. Mr. Urtula's family was in town from New Jersey to watch him walk across the stage, graduating from Boston College, a ceremony that was supposed to happen at 10 a.m. that morning at Alumni Stadium. His family never got to do so. An initial search of Mr. Urtula's cell phone led to an extensive investigation in which Suffolk County prosecutors and the MBTA Transit Police detectives determined that Miss Yu was physically, verbally, and psychologically abusive toward Mr. Urtula during their 18-month-long relationship. It also determined that abuse became more frequent and more powerful and more demeaning in the days and hours leading up to Mr. Urtula's untimely death. The abuse was witnessed by family and classmates of both parties and documented extensively in text messages between Miss Yu and Mr. Urtula and in Mr. Urtula's journal entries. On the morning of May 20th, Miss Yu was tracking Mr. Urtula's location, as she frequently did, on her phone. She went to the garage and in fact was present when Mr. Urtula jumped to his death. Students come to Boston from around the world to attend our renowned colleges and universities, eager to learn and experience our vibrant city. Their families and loved ones certainly do not expect them to face unending physical and mental abuse. You should know that in the 2 months prior to his death, the couple exchanged more than 75,000 texts, of which Miss Yu sent more than 47,000 text messages. Many of the messages clearly display the power dynamic in the relationship, wherein Miss Yu made demands and threats with the understanding that she had complete and total control over Mr. Urtula, both mentally and emotionally. The investigation revealed that Miss Yu used manipulative attempts and threats of self-harm to control him. It also found that she was aware of his spiraling depression and suicidal thoughts brought on by her abuse, yet she persisted, continuing to encourage him to take his own life. The indictment alleges Miss Yu's behavior was wanton and reckless and resulted in overwhelming Mr. Urtula's will to live, and that she created life-threatening conditions for him that she had a legal duty to alleviate, which we allege she failed to do. I would like to thank my staff, especially Assistant District Attorney Caitlin Grasso and Kaylin Campbell, who have led this investigation and carefully considered how to bring this unique case to trial, where a jury will ultimately decide if Miss Yu caused Mr. Urtula to take his life. The work of the MBTA Transit Police was invaluable. Superintendent Sullivan, thank you, and you will hear from him momentarily. We've been in close contact with the Urtula family, and they've requested to relay to the media their strong desire to be left alone with their grief. I would also like to just make a brief statement that this case is a tragedy, but it's just one example of a systemic epidemic. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It affects individuals in every community, regardless of age, economic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, or nationality. Domestic violence does not manifest in one particular way. It can include forced isolation from friends and family, physical assault, stalking, economic coercion, emotional threats, sexual assault, and psychological intimidation. Domestic violence is not perpetrated by one type of abuser. A perpetrator is not limited by their gender or the gender of their partner. Domestic violence may not always look the same, but it is always about power and control. I'll turn this over now to Superintendent Sullivan, and then we can take some questions if you have any.
Thank you. My name is Richard Sullivan, the Superintendent of the MBTA Transit Police Department. First and foremost, we'd like to express our sincerest condolences to the victim in this case, Mr. Ortula's family and loved ones. I personally responded to this scene back in May, and what appeared to be a self-inflicted horrific tragedy ended up being much more than that. I want to thank District Attorney Rollins. Under her current leadership, we enjoy a very strong professional partnership, which through that partnership we were able to uncover and get to where we are today. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Did she ever explicitly tell Ortula to kill himself?
I would comfortably say yes, thousands of times, hundreds of times certainly. In the 47,000 text messages, yes, there were many, many instances where she instructed him to do so.
Could you give us in as much as you can, what happened at this, on the final day where they jumped to his death at this Renaissance Roxbury Hotel, I believe?
Yeah, so I think a lot more facts will be presented when we have the arraignment, but just an incredibly tragic event where his family was present from New Jersey waiting for him to arrive, and there were a series of correspondence between him and his family where ultimately they learned that he intended to do this. If you want to maybe add a few statements about a little bit more of the facts.
You said something about her being there when this all happened.
Yes, in fact.
And I don't want to get into too many details because they will come out at the arraignment, but Miss Yu was aware of Mr. Ortula's location based on her tracking of him through the iPhone and was present on the roof of the parking structure at the time that he did jump. And so it's obviously a very difficult time for the family, and that's essentially the facts that we're willing to share at this point in time.
When is the arraignment?
So she is currently in Korea, and we initiated or requested a vote by the grand jury because we believe it's the right thing to do. We're in contact with somebody who is saying that they're representing her to see if she will voluntarily return. If she does not, we will utilize the power we have to get her back.
One more question.
Can you just speak to the Michelle Carter case? Obviously drew a lot of attention. I wondered how that verdict at all influenced your decision to move forward with this, and what response you have to the argument there that the text messages. So much of that case has dealt with as well.
Yeah. So as you're aware, the Conrad's bill is currently in front of the Judiciary Committee, and would make encouragement or assistance of suicide a crime punishable up to 5 years. Of course, we're aware of the Carter decision. This is a distinct fact pattern. There are similarities in that the culprit are both the girlfriends in those circumstances, but where I would distinguish, and I think the facts will show, in Carter there was very limited physical contact prior and some very egregious language in the instance or moments leading up to the death. We have, quite frankly, I would say the opposite of that. We have a barrage of a complete and utter attack on this man's very will and conscience and psyche by an individual to the tune of 47,000 text messages in the 2 months leading up, and an awareness, we would argue, of his frail state at that point. So similarities, of course, both out of our Commonwealth here, but this is a separate and distinct case, and we are going to focus exclusively on Mr. Ortula and his family here.
Could you just clarify what you said about your discussions with the family there, or with somebody there, about her coming back voluntarily? And if she doesn't, what options do you have?
Yeah,
in general?
that's it. Matt, we'll let him do this. All right, geez. Thank you for protecting me, though. So what I can tell you, yeah, I know. What I can tell you is there are any number of ways that we can try to extradite her back from Korea. There are also ways that we could look at potentially Interpol red notices, but we are fully fluent in the ways we can get her back if she doesn't want to do so voluntarily. We are hopeful, but cautiously optimistic that she will return on her own, but we're moving forward with this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.